There's been a lot of changes in the world, but the one thing that we consistently see is that a fair percentage of our client base is consistently buying rental properties.
Welcome to the Real Estate and Financial Independence Podcast. I'm your host, Chad Carson. You can also call me Coach, and this is a show all about helping you get out of the financial grind so that you can do more of what matters. Whether you're a brand new listener or a longtime listener, it's great to have you here today on the Coach Carson Team Podcast. The title for today's episode is How to Create a $3,000 per month real estate pension inside your retirement account. So I'm having a conversation with my friend, McKay from American IRA. He works at a company that does self-directed retirement accounts. And the scenario we talk about is those of us who want to retire eventually or leave our job or go part-time, eventually we have to have income to replace that salary. And in the past, there's this idea of having a pension where your company, or maybe you're in the military, they give you a pension as a retirement reward or security for the time you spent doing that. That's not as normal now. Maybe the military and some other few institutions have pensions, but it's not normal now. You have to create your own pension. And so real estate is a great solution for that. But in particular, a lot of people don't realize that you can actually use your retirement account to buy income properties, to buy rental properties. And so we take a deep dive on that. McKay is a real estate investor from Charlotte, North Carolina. He and his wife, Heather, own properties, and I've known them for years, and they've taken classes with me. He also, though, is a vice president at American IRA, where he helps other people use self-directed retirement accounts to buy rental properties, that make loans against real estate. I have my own retirement funds there at American IRA. And they are a sponsor of the Coach Carson platforms, of the YouTube channel, of the podcast. I'm just a big fan of what they do. So we go into a deep conversation today about how you can do that, just the mechanics of that and the logistics of that. And why would you do that, owning a rental property or multiple rental properties inside a retirement account to supplement your retirement. Now, before we get to the interview, it's time for my weekly behind the scenes segment where I share a short snippet of what's going on with me in my real estate investing, my finances, or behind the scenes in my business. And this week, I want to talk about a simple, lonely, old mobile home that we have in our portfolio. Now, we bought this mobile home along with a couple other mobile homes and an older house back in 2009. So we're recording this in 2021. So over 12 years ago, we bought this property kind of in the depths of the Great Recession. And it's been a decent rental for us. It's been a low income rental, but it's an old mobile home. And earlier this year, we had some problems. We had a tenant who's been there a long time, paying a really low rent, so about $400 per month. It's a very small mobile home, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. One of the mobile homes is really small. It's almost like a big closet, but it's usually been a single person or somebody in college or somebody who's retired who rents this. But we found that a couple places there, the floors were sagging next to windows where we have window air conditioning units. And so I think what we found, sending a contractor in there, was that water had gotten behind the wall, was it draining properly out of the house, and it just gotten into some of the wall and the floors and rotted those out. And there's just concerns about, is there going to be mold there too, or just wasn't airtight? And so we asked the tenant, if they were on a month-to-month lease at that point, if they could find another place to live. And we gave them time so that we could fix things. It's just going to be more involved. So that was the beginning of the story. The tenant actually said once we fix it, they might want to come back. But it's sat there empty for several months because we had a hard time getting somebody to fix it. So we have other properties and we have a contractor we trust to do the work. And I've had to meet them out there. And I'm just telling you all this just to see some details of one particular part of my real estate business. And I actually talked to a contractor on the phone a couple of months ago, and he was going to put me on his list to fix things. And he kind of said up front, this might be a $3,000 to $5,000 fix. We're going to have to take aluminum siding off the side of the trailer. We're going to need to replace some of the flooring, the wood in the flooring. Might be able to save some of the carpet, might not. They're going to frame in a spot in the wall where the window AC can go instead of sitting on the window. That was part of the problem. It was just not draining properly. So a lot of details there. But the main point for me is it's been difficult to get somebody to do this job. It's not a really fun job for this contractor. There's other bigger jobs that he's making more money on. And I've just been sort of at the bottom of the list, even with other work that we've done in the past with this person. So I've had to just stay on top of the person, be a squeaky wheel, follow up, and I'm willing to pay the money. And why would I be willing to pay the money? I think once we do this and we clean it up a little bit more, we were probably under rented. I think we can get $500 a month, maybe more. A market rent for a nicer mobile home like this in the same location would probably be $650, maybe $750 a month. So we're well below the rent, but older mobile home, there's some limitations, not some things that are super nice about it, but safe and secure and affordable housing, right? We're in the affordable housing business. So I am willing to spend it because if we got $500 a month coming in, we would relatively quickly, probably, in a year or so, pay that money back. Then we'd be back to actually making a profit because we've got to pay back that expense that we put into the property. But we've kind of gone back and forth. Should we take this mobile home out and get a new one? Should we just keep the existing mobile home? I spent about a month researching new mobile homes, and I decided just to keep the existing one instead of spending about $30,000, $40,000 to get a new one. Just the math was pretty close on doing that. We decided to keep it and just go with it. And so I finally asked the contractor to do this work. So that's just a day in the life of one particular property. It's been sitting vacant now, I'm embarrassed to say, for about 6 months this year, between me researching new construction, letting the tenant get out, now trying to wait for another couple months on this contractor to start. And I'm bugging him every week to do that. This is a real life scenario on one of my lower rent properties. We've considered selling this property here and there, but we own it free and clear. It makes cash flow, does okay for us. So that's it. If you like learning more about me behind the scenes or having me help you behind the scenes, there are a couple different ways that you can do that. The first is you can get my free email newsletter, which comes out each Monday and Friday, and I always share a little bit about what's going on with me. Also share my newest podcast and YouTube episodes, and you can register for that for free at coachcarson.com/REI toolkit. New subscribers get my real estate investing toolkit, which includes helpful tools like a closing checklist, a deal worksheet, a tenant screening criteria checklist that I use, and lots of other goodies that'll help you on your journey to financial independence. You can get it all for free at coachcarson.com/REI toolkit. The second way you can connect with me behind the scenes is that I teach online courses where you can interact with me and let me help you with your real estate investing. Some courses are always available anytime on topics like creative financing. If you ever wanted to use non-bank financing, I have a deep dive in that course. I have a course on finding off-market deals, another one on the due diligence and closing process and paperwork, and then others that cover other details of real estate investing. And then my premier course, which happens twice per year right now, every spring and fall, is called Real Estate Deal School. And students go through live with me over a 10-week period where I help you step by step to purchase your next investment property. You can get details on these courses at coachcarson.com/courses. Now let's get started with today's interview. Hey, Sean, welcome back to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Chad. Good to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'm going to reference everybody that we had a prior conversation in episode number 118, where we sort of went into the big picture of American IRA, which is a partner of coachcarson.com that I refer a lot of people to for investing in self-directed retirement accounts. I'm a big fan. Obviously, I've been doing this for years with my own account with y'all, and I'm excited about the possibilities. And so we talked about in that conversation all of the different ways you can invest your self-directed retirement account in real estate and kind of at a higher level, and what are the things to watch out for. Today, what I'd love to talk about with you, and I know this is an expertise that you have as both an investor and as someone who works with American IRA and helps people use their retirement accounts, is a scenario where someone wants to actually create a pension plan or a pension they go to they're thinking about retirement 10 or 20 years from now, and they're like, well, I'm going to have some Social Security, but I would love to create this recurring income inside my retirement account so that I can then pay my bills. And that's something people are nervous about. And one of the really cool tools that you have seen people do with American IRA and with their self-directed retirement accounts is buying rental properties inside of their retirement account. And a lot of people don't realize they can do that. So I want to get into those details, but before I do, Sean, just so people have never heard of you or haven't met you yet, maybe could you give a little bit of background on you personally, you and Heather investing, and then also what your role is with American IRA?
Yeah, absolutely. So my wife and I actually took your class, as you're very well aware, back in, I believe it was 2011. And that was a really eye-opening experience for us. I had done a couple of real estate deals before then. And so this was a great way for us to kind of get a foundation of how to properly analyze deals and what have you. And we've been really fortunate since then we've utilized a lot of the strategies that you've taught us over the years. We house hacked. So we bought a duplex for our first residence together. We lived in one side and rented out the other, which was a great way to live in a solid part of town and not pay a lot of money for that. We've raised private money to buy rental properties. We were very early in our working career. So at the very beginning, we had to be a little bit creative with how we acquired properties. So we've utilized a lot of the things that you taught us. So ultimately, I think one of the things that does separate us at American IRA is we're not speaking theoretically about how investments work. We do have an understanding. I can certainly speak to and understand a lot of the pitfalls and mistakes because, obviously, as you know, if you're in the game, you definitely make a lot of mistakes. So we love this space. We love investing. We love learning. And as you said, rental properties is a phenomenal way to build wealth and create cash flow.
Yeah. So thank you for your kind words on that. You and Heather have done the lion's share of that work, but glad you were able to kind of help you get a foundation. And but so y'all have done great. You're personally an investor and you've got your career as working with American IRA. You've invested on the side, done really well with that, bought some properties, and y'all are in Charlotte, North Carolina. For people who aren't familiar at all, just like real quick on what a self-directed retirement account is, before we get into the details of this rental property and the fact that you can buy a rental property inside of it, could you give sort of like just the introduction to a self-directed retirement account? Because a lot of people just think about retirement accounts. They have a 401k at work, they buy index funds and stocks, which is fine too. But like, tell us about what this is for those who are brand new to this concept.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, when we think about retirement accounts, typically we think about investing in the stock market. So we're thinking about stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. And you and I are both a believer that can definitely hold a place in your portfolio. Those can be really useful investments. But really what we do in our industry is we just bring awareness to all of the options available with retirement accounts. And so technically clients can still open accounts with us and invest in the stock market. But our industry has coined the term self-directed to kind of differentiate away from advisors that purely deal in those sorts of kind of typically stock market driven products. And so it's the same retirement account with us. So you're still opening traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs, and you can work with old 401ks. We use that term to identify that you as the client are picking the investments. And also usually there's going to be what we consider alternative assets as a part of your portfolio. So things like real estate, precious metals. We're seeing clients investing in private equity deals, cryptocurrencies, things like that. And so the retirement account has the exact same rules and regulations associated with it. We're just giving you kind of a different platform with different opportunities available to you with your retirement account.
Yeah. And so a lot of people listening to this, we're obviously like different types of investments, but real estate is a big deal. And, you mentioned cryptocurrencies and limited partnerships. There's other things that a lot of us want to diversify into. And so you're basically a vehicle to have the same kind of retirement account that you would have in a traditional sense, but it's just giving you more options that you can invest in. So and I've done this. This is one reason I've always, connected with you guys and always liked what you do is that I've been a client as well. And so I have index funds, and some of my money in American IRA is invested in your stock kind of option with, I think y'all use TD Ameritrade. And so I have index funds there, and I like to have some of that money there. But then I also own what we're going to talk about today. I have a rental property that is owned by a self-directed retirement account. And I've also done lending out of the retirement account. So one of my favorite things is to loan money to other people who buy real estate. And so I guess the main point to start this conversation is a lot of us have trouble getting started in real estate because we don't have a lot of capital. It's so hard to save up that first amount of money. And so you got to do that outside your retirement account too. But it might take, a year or two to save up $30,000-$40,000, and that's great, right? But then you might have this retirement account over here that from your old job that has $100,000 in there or $200,000 or more. That's a huge opportunity, right? You got to choose wisely about where to invest that money, but that's some capital that you've built up over a 10, 20 year period. And that could be allocated both within the stock market, also invest in real estate if you like doing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're a great case study, as you said, for somebody who can take that retirement account vehicle and go a lot of different directions. And hopefully, if nothing else, the people listening to this can understand that you're not having to go just purely into one type of asset class. You can spread that retirement account over a number of opportunities, and that might be the best way to go. So absolutely.
All right, so let's transition. So we got the concept. People kind of are familiar with what a self-directed retirement account is. They're familiar with they can invest in different things. They can make loans. They could buy in the stock market. They could also buy real estate. So let's talk about the real estate piece, because I think one of the things I always evangelize about real estate is there's so many benefits. But I really love that if you want to live off of your assets, of your investments, that rental property has this recurring income where every single month you've got to replace that paycheck at some point. And, having that recurring income coming in is a big deal. And people used to, back in the day, at least that's the myth, is that people had pension plans that paid them a pension. My grandfather flew for Delta Airlines, and he worked there for decades. He retired from there, and he had this beautiful pension that paid him like a lot of money every month, and wasn't that great, but that's totally gone. I mean, there might be some people in the military who have a pension. There's, a few of those things out there, but for the most part, some people are going to get hopefully Social Security, which can pay some. But if you really want to have a full, pay for everything in your retirement, you're going to have some other income. And so rental properties have been what you and I both try to sell people on. Hey, get some rental income. Maybe you get a few properties, you get them paid off. And now maybe if you have 3 properties, maybe that makes you $3,000 a month in rental income. And for the rest of your life, like as long as you own that rental property, you have that, and it's inflation hedged, so it goes up in value. So we don't have to tell everybody listen to this. That's a good thing to do. But let's start with the idea of can you buy that in in a self-directed retirement account, or is that something you see people doing or that you recommend people do?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I started in 2008 at American IRA, which was obviously a wild time in the world and in the economy. And so it was interesting to see that even during that very difficult downturn and the time since then, where so many of the asset classes have seen such incredible appreciation, there's been a lot of changes in the world. But the one thing that we consistently see is that a fair percentage of our client base is consistently buying rental properties. And so at American IRA, we're never advising clients. We're not suggesting certain opportunities for you. We're just simply helping you with the paperwork to fulfill your investment journey. And so with that, it's interesting to hear perspectives from investors as to what they're doing and why they're doing it. And so, as you've already alluded to some of this with rental properties, what we consistently hear is such a great hedge against inflation. It's a hard asset. It's something that a lot of investors feel as though they understand a little bit better than some of the more complicated investments that are out there. And that cash flow piece is incredible because, as you said, we're both huge believers in index funds. That can be a really great tool. Perhaps maybe about the only downside with index funds is even on a high dividend yield index fund, at least in today's market, you might be somewhere around maybe 3, perhaps 4% in terms of the yield that you get on that. Versus with real estate, if you have the skill set and you put the time in, you can perhaps do a good bit better with the actual cash flow that you make from the purchase of those assets. So it absolutely can be done with these accounts.
Yeah, we're probably being generous on that yield. Right now, the S&P 500 index fund, I think, was like 1.8% dividend yield, and that's not your total return, but that it can go up in value. But if you're going to live off the cash flow, 1.8% in a dividend, bonds are like 2% right now. I mean, we're living in the world of low interest rates, low yields. That's a huge issue for those of us who are trying to live off of our retirement accounts. I mean, or our investments. That's a challenge to have to live off those kind of small yields out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's say somebody is interested in that. They like rental properties. People are doing that. Obviously, some of your clients are doing that. Let's just talk about the practical side of it. So somebody, let's just use an example. Let's say in a good scenario, we'll talk about somebody who has less than this, but let's say somebody has $150,000 in their retirement account, and they have maybe some other money somewhere else, but they've decided to put $150,000 with American IRA. They move it over to your account. Let's maybe even just start there. Like they used to have their money at Vanguard, and they want to take a portion of their money, $150,000, and move it to American IRA. Let's just even start there before we even start looking at rental properties. Like how does that process work?
Yeah, great point. And so, as you're alluding to, the critical thing is to do things in the right order. And so, as you said, before you go out there looking for opportunities, the first thing that someone needs to do is first establish their retirement account with a firm like American IRA that can help you in buying that rental property with your IRA as the actual owner for that. So there's an application kit that can be pulled online. You can fill it out through the portal, or you can print it out and fill it out. And that's basically the baseline of the documents needed so that your account is actually just simply established. So once your account is established, you receive a welcome letter, you have an account number, and we can assist you with the process to get your monies pulled from the current custodian. Because as you said, it might be an IRA, it could be an old 401k, an old thrift savings plan, or a 403b. So we'll help you. Really what we've gone to make it as easy as possible is we coordinate a call with somebody from your current custodian. So we all get on a call, so we're all hearing the same information, what that processor wants in terms of originals of documents, things like that. And then once those monies are moved over to us, then we can start hunting for real estate deals.
So it's essentially like in the non-retirement account world, you're having to get a pre-qualification letter, or you're having to kind of line up your savings for your down payment. That's essentially what we're doing at that stage, is getting the money in the place where you could actually fund it. Because American IRA could probably fund a deal pretty quickly, once the money's sitting there in your account. But like getting it from Vanguard or whoever it is to you guys, that's a process that could take a little bit of time. You just want to work on that ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And most institutions, they do a nice job. But what we find is that if it's a huge company like a Fidelity, a Vanguard, what have you, it just depends on the processor that you get and what their book of business looks like and just how many things they have to process. So everyone puts in a solid effort. But as you said, it can take a few weeks for that current custodian to get the funds over to us.
Okay. So, and by the way, there'll be a link to get to American IRA. They're been a sponsor of Coach Carson for a long time now, and you'll be able to get a link there to go to their website. And if you wanted to apply at any point when we're talking about this, you can do that in the link in the video description if you're watching on YouTube, or in the podcast description. So somebody takes that step, they open up an account, you help them get the money moved over. They're now sitting there with $150,000 in their self-directed retirement account at American IRA. All right, so they've got that money ready. Let's talk about just the general process. And part of this is about retirement accounts. Part of it's just about real estate hunting in general. Like, what would we recommend? What would you recommend, Sean, as sort of some preliminary steps before somebody goes out and buys that rental property?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, it's going to be pretty similar to your overall investing process. So you're maybe looking at off-market deals. Maybe you're working with a realtor and you're looking at properties that are listed on the MLS. I would suggest pulling the documents from our website ahead of time as to what we call the real estate instructions. And so that gives you kind of a format for what it needs to look like when you identify a property. So for example, the big differences between this and other investments that maybe someone's been involved with is that there's going to be a very specific verbiage for whom the buyer will be. And so we'll give you that language, but it will basically articulate that it's your retirement account making the offer as opposed to you or maybe an LLC that you own. So that's the first part, to make sure you have the verbiage correct. Also understanding that as the administrator and ultimately the custodian, we're going to sign all the documentation, even starting with the offer to purchase, as well as the client as the account holder on these forms. And so it's kind of a combined effort to get the documents signed and turned around and submitted for the offer.
So I've done these documents a lot. In fact, the very first self-directed retirement account investment I did, I was 23 or 24 years old, and I brought over a private lender and taught them how to say, you can go put your money with American IRA and do this. This is how it works. And so that there's some signatures to go around, paperwork, but it's not an impossible task. This is just, but there's a little bit of an extra step where the custodian has to sign it, you have to sign it. So I like that advice to just get those instructions ahead of time. But other than that, really the process is the same. Like you said, you're going to be, however you find a deal outside your retirement account is how you're going to be looking for them inside your retirement account. That could be going out and walking for dollars. That could be MLS, going through a realtor. That could be sending letters out, or looking for properties that way. ultimately you have a lead, you have a deal. And let's say we have this $150,000 in our account. Let's say we find a deal that costs all in $100,000. So we like this deal. It rents for $1,000 per month. It's in a location that's like a location we think is up and coming. And I know some people are gonna be thinking, well, I'm in California, that'll buy me like a cup of coffee, right? But this is, if you're long distance investing in another state, $100,000 is, a C neighborhood is reasonable in the Midwest, is reasonable in some small towns in the Southeast. It's not reasonable at all in other places. So, we're gonna have to think, you're gonna have to match your money to the market. That's a whole nother topic. But let's say that somebody does have that, Sean. They've now identified a property. And let's just use the example with a realtor. That way they're just kind of keeping it simple. So they have this real estate agent who's identified a property for them for $100,000. They now want to make an offer on this property. Like what would I do if I'm that person with a retirement account? What would I call you guys up? Would I send the paperwork? Like what would I even do logistically?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so really we try to be kind of like the local bank that works with you and makes it as easy as possible. I always tell clients, especially on that first deal or two, we prefer for you to do what you might consider over communicating, as opposed to us not being in the loop and then having to kind of put things together last minute. And so we will have clients that will call us and they'll say, okay, we're working on this offer to purchase. We can certainly direct them to the verbiage on the instructions for how the buyer lines will need to read. But the critical thing is going to be, whether it's email, whether it's phone, letting us know that there is a deal coming down the line, so that, again, not only can we sign the documentation, but also keeping in mind that the retirement account is a totally separate entity than you as a person. And so with that, what happens is we're also going to send the funds per your direction to, whether it's a closing attorney, wherever it needs to go to for any sort of due diligence or earnest money needed on the front end. So it's kind of a combination of signing around documents. We're just making sure that it's the correct verbiage. We're not looking at it to make sure that this is a phenomenal deal for your investment account. Again, this is purely self-directed. And then we're making sure that the funds are coming from your account so that the IRA is responsible for its asset.
All right. So not only are you going to be signing the documents as the custodian for this account, you're also going to be sending the earnest money. So like if they needed $1,000 earnest money deposit as part of the negotiation, then American IRA would cut a check, mail that, or you could wire it. I guess you could do that as well. And then send that to some person's escrow account, whether that's like a closing attorney or a real estate agent. So that that's a really key point I'm glad you brought up, is that this is a separate entity. Like if I can't just go and write the $500 check or the $1,000 check myself, I need to keep all of that separate. I can direct it, but I can't do any of the actual steps. Like y'all are the ones who have to do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So our realtor sends you the contract, you get all the paperwork, you have good conversations. American IRA signs that contract after you say that it looks okay. You send the money to the realtor. It's under contract. You got this property under contract. Now you have a due diligence period, and you have an inspector go out there. That's pretty typical. You've got you're doing your realtor. You have a property manager maybe who's going to be helping you evaluate the property. But you get through all of that. You get to now the point where you're going to buy the property. You say everything looks good. You're going to go to a closing. Is there anything else you can think of that people should be aware of, just best practices, pitfalls that might come up when somebody's going to close on a property with their funds from a retirement account?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, there's perhaps a number of vendors that are going to be involved in this closing process. So it could be appraisers, it could be surveyors, it could be all these different entities involved. And so the sooner the realtor / account holder can make us aware of these vendors, and in particular that closing agent. So as you're well aware, depending upon the state, it could be a closing attorney, it could be a title company, it could be just some other sort of escrow agent. Bringing us into the loop, usually an email introduction with those team members, so that we can start to help them as well understand how the documents will need to read for the closing documents. That helps to make it a cleaner process as well.
Got it. All right. So the closing agent, whether that's a title company or an attorney, that's a kind of a key component there. You've already been introduced to the real estate agent. Some others I'm thinking of, just kind of going through my closing checklist, which everybody can get if they're on my newsletter. They always get my closing checklist. But you're going to have other people like your inspector that I mentioned. Mm-hmm. You're going to have an insurance agent. That's a big one. Making sure you get insurance on the property. And I find this is one of those things, like for those of you who are new to real estate, when you borrow money from a bank, it's, there's actually some controls there that the bank helps you with, because they give you a checklist and say, hey, where's your insurance contract? Where's this? Where's your appraisal? But when you're buying, in this case, we're talking about paying cash for it. Like you have the cash is not coming from your personal account, it's coming from your retirement account, but there's not going to be that bank making sure you do all this stuff. So you need to have a checklist. That's why I always give people this checklist for free, because if you don't have a checklist, this is like an airplane pilot taking off with a jumbo jet and not checking the checklist. You're about to spend $100,000 on an investment. You better have a checklist and make sure you get insurance, you get title insurance, you talk to the attorney about this. So that's something I know you encourage people to do as well from the IRA standpoint, but also just from the real estate standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, there's kind of the mandatory elements that we'll need, such as settlement statements. And then you make the great point that there are things that clients can waive away, such as having hazard insurance if it's not going to have a mortgage on it, or title insurance, things like that. So yeah, absolutely. It's like you said, having that kind of deck of items and vendors is critical.
So we could probably go down a rabbit hole on this topic, and maybe we can a little bit later in the conversation go over pluses and minuses. But at this point, some people might be wondering, all right, I'm about to get title to this property. How is the title in the name of the retirement account? Do some people put it in an entity, an LLC or something? What's the simplest scenario? What do you see people doing a lot of the time? And then maybe we can talk about alternatives just briefly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say definitely 90+% of the time when our clients are buying real estate, they will just simply have the retirement account itself purchase the property, we'll say the rental property. And so with that format, there's really kind of two strategies with that. So they can either have, essentially the way it's going to read is New Vision Trust Custodian FBO, meaning for benefit of, and then they can either elect to have their name IRA, so it could be Chad Carson IRA, or the client can elect to have their account number on the titling instead of their name. So again, there's personal preference there. Some people want to keep their name, their verbiage out of any sort of public documents. And so, it's just whatever makes sense for them.
Got it. All right, so that's the typical scenario, and again, I think one of the, it seems like a big deal, but one thing y'all do a great job of is the paperwork and making sure the names are correct and the insurance names are correct. That's something y'all do a lot of looking at to make sure, because if you did have the deed incorrect, you could probably fix it later, but if you had one word incorrect on that, it could create some title issues later on. So I appreciate that y'all do that, because that's a big deal at closing.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks.
Okay, so you get to closing, the title attorney or the title company or attorney, they handle the closing. So you guys get direction, I assume, from the closing attorney with saying, here's how much money we need net. And in this case, this is a $100,000 purchase. Maybe you've already paid $1,000 in earnest money, but there might be some closing costs. So maybe you got $1,500 in closing costs in addition to the purchase. So maybe that number is $101,250 or something, So you guys how do you get direction on how much to send? Is that coming from the settlement statement? Is that coming from something else?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point. And so really with our role, again, not ever proactively making decisions on behalf of the client's account, we always need to get specific directions as to what amount to fund. So if we receive that settlement statement, then essentially we're not going to fulfill that until the client does what we call a read and approved. And so they sign the document stating, yes, I've looked this over. This looks good to me, to my realtor. Please fund that specific amount. And so we're then fulfilling that usually on a real estate closing via wire. And so we'll receive wiring instructions, again, that the client has read and approved, stating these are the specific wiring instructions, and please send that.
Got it. Okay. So there's some paperwork that happens. Ultimately, you close on this property. $101,000 or whatever goes from American IRA and in this case, my account. and it goes to this closing attorney. The seller of the property gets their money. The closing attorney gets their money. But at the end of all this whole process, my retirement account now owns a piece of real estate. So bingo, that was our whole goal here. And I know there's a lot of details, but hopefully the people listening appreciate just like, there's some details there, and sometimes it seems mysterious how this thing happens. So I wanted to get it from you guys who do these all the time, what that looks like. But now our retirement account owns it. Here are a couple of scenarios I was thinking of that might happen is, you want to get this property rented so you can start making money as soon as possible. But let's say that you have a property manager, which I recommend everybody do, because you could let's talk about this actually. You could go do it yourself and, find a tenant and all that. But my experience has been that there's some of the compliance issues that are one of the main things to pay attention to with a self-directed retirement account that you can get in trouble with if you write a check personally and now you got to reimburse it. And so like just getting a third-party property manager to help you not only lease the property, but maybe do some repairs if the property needs repairs. Maybe you could just talk about what you see clients doing and maybe what the cleanest thing is to do in terms of having somebody else help you rent this property and manage the repairs for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I fully agree with that as we take a step back, so the IRS wants us as account holders and certain people in our family lineage, so our spouse, our lineal family members, to be very passive with investments owned by our retirement account. And so to your point, if we have a third-party property manager in place, it could just simply be an individual in town. It could be a full-blown property management company, but a third party that's handling some of the signing of leases and some of the day-to-day logistics, that definitely helps us to be a very passive investment for our portfolio. Now, some clients will speak with their professionals, and their professionals are comfortable with the structure where there's not officially a third-party day-to-day property manager. Again, we're the record keeper, so we're not going to force that. But as you and I unfortunately both know, there are issues that come up sometimes when we own rental properties. And so in North Carolina, for example, if a tenant's not paying rent and you're starting that process to evict that tenant, that starts with county documents, a summary ejectment. And so when you're getting into legal documents to get a tenant removed from the property, there's going to be someone who's officially a quote unquote agent representing that property. And you as the account holder should absolutely not be that individual. And so at that point in time, it's really mandatory to have a third party in place. Perhaps that's hiring an attorney to fulfill that eviction process. But as you said, really the ideal scenario is on the front end. You just bite the bullet, you put a third party in place. And it doesn't mean you can't be very active in overseeing how they're reviewing potential applications for tenants and things like that. But you want to have that third party in place that's fulfilling some of those procedural things there.
Yeah, good points on the worst case scenarios where you're having tenants you have to evict or something like that. But I'm even on like just the ease of use of having this rental property. If you just want to be more passive and enjoy it, this is your retirement account, right? So sometimes you got to let go a little bit, I think, and hire this person out. And you personally can't make money as a property manager anyway. Like that would be if I understand it right, Sean, that would be a disqualified transaction, prohibited transaction where you pay yourself $100 in management fee. You can't do that. Like the money all has to go to your retirement account. Even if you did manage it, you'd have to, and if your professional told you that was what you should do, then okay. But the simplest scenario, you just want to go with best practices, hire the manager, pay them their money. It's well worth it. I do that both inside my retirement account and outside. And then they're going to, so let's say that on this particular example, you've got $10,000 in repairs that need to be done, some cosmetic stuff just to make it look good, landscaping, painting. That's why you got the property. That's why it was a pretty good deal. You could then, your property manager could oversee that. They could hire the contractor with your approval. And then, so the custodian, I assume, just like with the closing, could then send the money to the contractor directly after you get an invoice. Is that how that would work?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, it could either flow directly to the property manager and it could be made out to the property manager, and then they'll turn around and release funds to that contractor. We do have some clients that will actually have us make a check out to, let's say, ABC Roofing Company. And the check is made out to that company, but it is physically sent to the account holder. And the thought there is if and when the work is done to their satisfaction, they can then hand the check to that vendor on the spot. So again, you're still able to completely control the vendors, make sure the quality is there and what have you, but you just want to make sure. I'm personally a big fan of, like you said, if a property manager has the capacity to be essentially that general contractor, I think that's definitely the easiest way to do it.
Got it. Okay, good. All right, so we've gone through that process. We've got a beautiful rental property that's clean, that's looking good, landscape is good. That's the point here now. Let's get this thing rented. Your property manager puts it out there. They do the property showings. They find a good tenant. And then at this point, there's a little bit more passive, is my understanding. Like the property manager will hold the security deposit. The property manager is going to sign the lease. Like, does the custodian have to be? Do you, as American IRA, have to be involved in that process, or can that all be handled on the property manager level?
Yeah, as you said, that's definitely the property manager's role, and so they can control a lot of that. And I think one thing that comes up pretty frequently when we have these conversations is kind of flow of money. And so there's always this concern about, in this case, American IRA going to have to continuously send out money, pay the property manager each month, pay different vendors. And so ultimately what we will typically see is sometimes clients will elect to even keep maybe a little bit larger reserve account with the property manager. So the property manager can pay out different vendors if there's leaky faucets and maybe a little bit of HVAC work that month, something like that. And then they're going to collect the gross rent. So if the gross rent, I think you said, was $1,000 in our example, the property manager takes their fee out of that $1,000, any sort of repairs, and then the net proceeds are going to be sent to the American IRA account for the account holder. And so it can a lot of times be kind of one-way traffic where it's not back and forth with money, but just kind of flowing from the tenant through property manager to the account.
Got it. So the end result would be like, and I'm going to talk about from my perspective, what really happens is like I have a property manager who sends me a statement every month, and I can see like, here's how much rent was collected. Here's what my maintenance expenses were. If I have a question about that, I can call the property manager and say, hey, how come we spent $500 this month? What was that all about? So that's one level. But then at the bottom of that manager statement, there's a net number. And let's just say that in this case, that was $600. So $600 was left over after collecting the rent, paying expenses. That $600, we then give the instructions to the property manager to send that money to our retirement account. And so every month, there's another statement that you can check on your online account with American IRA and see, $600 was deposited into my retirement account. And then that cash account at the retirement account, which was about $150 originally, we had about $40-something thousand left over. Every month, that's getting a little bit bigger by $600, $700, whatever it is. And that's how we can kind of monitor our investment from there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so we're kind of in that stabilized phase where we've got a property manager collecting rent, we're monitoring things, we're looking at statements. A lot of the hard work's done, but I think it'd be kind of fun, and I want to get your feedback on this, Sean. So let's go back to our original scenario. This is a person who maybe they're 40 years old, they've got this $150,000 retirement account. Their goal at 60, when they can start living off their retirement account, is to start taking money out and have this pension, this income that maybe they want to make $2,000 a month. Well, right now they're making $600 a month or $700 a month after paying their expenses. It'd be kind of cool for us to fast forward a little bit and say, all right, what's next? You own one rental property. Let me get your feedback. What would be a good plan if they said, I'd like to own more? What could they do from there?
Yeah, so there's a lot of directions that we'll see clients go. So depending upon their risk tolerance, their interest in kind of building the portfolio, there's endless opportunities. But one thing we'll see is where clients kind of get into the habit of looking for real estate deals. And so even though their ultimate goal might be to end up with a few properties, 3, 4, 5 rental properties paid off, they might get there a variety of ways. And so they might be purchasing a rental property, but from time to time, they might find a property that they may or may not want to hold on to for the next 30, 40 years, but they found it and there's good equity there. And so they can use some of the capital in their retirement account. Maybe that retirement account is borrowing money from some investor in town and doing kind of a shorter term type of flip activity so that they can get an infusion of capital. So maybe they're making 20, 30, 40 grand from doing that flip. That money, obviously you got to work with your CPA and kind of get the full understanding of what that looks like. But whatever that net money is flows back to the retirement account, so that maybe we're getting closer to paying cash for that next rental property. But obviously a lot of different strategies on how you can build rental portfolios there.
No, I like that. I like that you brought up that, rental properties is one strategy. You also see people flipping houses in their retirement accounts. So you got that $50,000, $40-something thousand left over. You might not be able to buy a property for cash with that amount of money. So you got to start thinking outside the box, saying, okay, well, maybe I can find a house that's worth $150,000, $200,000, but I could buy it for $100,000 or $125,000. Then how do you get the money? You got $40,000 in here. You're going to want to set some of that aside as a reserve account. So maybe you really only have about $30,000 to spend. This is where you think about leverage, perhaps. Maybe you could get a private lender. And let's talk a little bit about debt. Like, people don't realize sometimes that you can borrow money from your retirement account, but what are some of the highlights of what you need to be careful of that's different than a normal borrowing of money?
Yeah, so it is, as you said, it is a different debt structure. So the great thing about doing investments outside of retirement accounts is that bank financing in today's world is relatively easy to get. If you have good credit, a good debt to income, you can get very low interest. You can get very long terms of 30-year fixed amortized loans. And in most of those structures, it's going to be a personally guaranteed debt structure. So hopefully you understand, as the borrower, if you don't perform on that loan, you fail to make payments for long enough, that bank can actually foreclose on the piece of real estate. And technically, in a lot of scenarios, they can actually sue you, or perhaps sue your LLC that borrowed the money, things of that nature. So that's kind of the typical loan structure we're used to with banks. With retirement accounts, however, we need to get what's called a non-recourse loan. So the lender, whether it's an individual or a bank, understands the only thing they can do if the property is foreclosed on is they can simply foreclose, take the property back. They can't sue you as the account holder. They can't sue the retirement account. So it's kind of an asset-based or collateral-based loan. So, obviously you're really familiar with the financing structures, Chad. What we find is that there's definitely less lenders that are willing to lend in a non-recourse structure. And from an institutional level, the interest rates will be higher. So you might be able to get an investment loan right now for 3 or 4% interest. In the non-recourse space with institutions, you might be at closer to 6, 7+% in terms of the interest rate. But what are you seeing out there?
I think that's typical, and the only time we've done it with a retirement account and borrowed money, it's been with a private lender. So like I've either seen it private loans, somebody who's willing to do a non-recourse loan, because in our example, they had a $225,000 property and we're borrowing like $50,000. So it's all right, that's a really small amount. That person's like, okay, I hope this retirement account survives, but this whole thing dies, I'd get this property and I'd be jumping for joy. That's great.
Right.
And so that's what when you think about an asset-based lender, it might be an individual, like another investor you met who at your real estate club, who has some money, that they could loan. It could be a retirement account, right? Like it could be borrowing from like somebody else's retirement account who just wants to make 6% interest or something. So there are people out there, and it's going to take some work to meet those people. I've had my eye on it, and they're, I have not seen a whole lot of lenders I really loved who did these non-recourse loans, but I think there's more of these investment-oriented lenders who are evolving and kind of out there, and I'm exploring some of those, and I'll actually put a link. I'm going to work on a financing page on my website where I have just some of the resources I'm seeing out there in terms of financing, and just have some that I've done some due diligence on, and just allow people to go look at that. So I'll have a link in the show notes for that as well. Then I'll mention that some of those lenders do non-recourse loans. Typically, you have to have a larger down payment. So if you normally, you might have a 20% or 25% down payment on a normal loan. Maybe they're looking for 30%, 40% instead, which might be okay. So like going back to our example, let's say you found a $200,000 property that you could that you got a really good deal on, and you could buy it for 100 or 125, and you had 30,000 of your own money to invest, and maybe you borrowed $100,000 from this lender, or maybe 110, that's under, that's almost a 50%, 60% loan to value, 110 versus 200. So yes, the key here is finding a good deal. And I like that you mentioned that right now you need to grow that portfolio. You have 30, 40,000 bucks in there. The goal is to grow that money so that you can buy another rental property and just replicate what you did on that first one. And that could be a flip. It could also be, what we've done is just save that cash flow. Like, it's just a small, slow, boring kind of climb. But if you start getting that $600, $700, at the end of the year, maybe you have 6,000 or 7,000 bucks additional money in there. The end of year 2, now you got another 12,000, 14,000 bucks in there. You add that to the original 40. It might take you a few years to get there, but in the meantime, you're just collecting rent, and it's just a slow plodding kind of game, kind of like the tortoise versus the hare. But if you got a 20-year horizon, you're now going to wait a couple years, buy another rental property for cash, and then you can do it again. And it's kind of cool. Like, over time, that slow plodding little strategy you can end up with 3 or 4 properties over a 10, 15-year period. And the end result is you've got 3 or 4 properties that all together, maybe now, because they've appreciated, produce $1,000 net each. And now you've got your $3,000 or $4,000 pension plan that by the time you're 60, 20 years from now, you've got 3,000 or 4,000 bucks coming in from these rental properties, and you have no debt on them at all. It's just cash money coming in.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, I think what's underrated, because again, it's kind of that part of the slow plotting process, is keep in mind with these self-directed accounts, you can still make your annual contributions as well.
Oh yeah.
So as you said, you have that 6,000 or 7,000 a year from the cash flow, but you, depending upon your age, you might be, as of right now, putting $6,000 or $7,000 in capital contributions into that account. So before you know it, as you said, you're ready to make that next cash acquisition.
Love it. Cool. So we've gone through a lot of detail, Sean. I hope that's helpful. I mean, sometimes just to jog people's imagination, we have to show them that here's this tool, self-directed retirement accounts, but look at the end result. Like, you could end up at 60 years old with $4,000 a month coming in for the rest of your life. Add that to your Social Security income, and you got another 1,000 or 2,000 bucks. Add it maybe to a few rentals you have outside of your retirement account. I mean, you could be in really good shape. You could be making $10,000 a month in a retirement in a world where people are struggling to even pay their bills or even stop working. That's, I don't know about you, Sean. I mean, but that's that kind of idea just blows my mind, that these really simple tools we're talking about here, a self-directed retirement account, buying rental properties, could end up with this lifestyle that's pretty incredible.
No, I agree. It's and as you said, ideally you have a couple of decades to kind of compound, whether it's paying down of loans or saving up money and what have you. But we think a lot about that, about how to create content around these fundamental concepts, where if you're able to just get your hands around a handful of properties and just hold on to get them paid off. Or I love, you put out a piece of content probably a few years ago now, where I think it was like buy 3, sell 2, keep 1. And, that's also something that you could utilize in your retirement account as well. So there's just so many ways you can go with it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we're kind of preaching to the choir, talking to each other, because we love this stuff and we do it and practice it. But for anybody who's interested in the mechanics of this, obviously, we're gonna talk in a moment about where you can get in touch with Sean and the team over at American IRA. Before we do that, though, Sean, do you have any final? It could be best practice, or it could be a big pitfall that you've seen. So you've watched a lot of clients do this kind of transaction and do this procedure. Is there anything that comes to mind for you that we haven't talked about that you would just think is important to remind people of in this whole process?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that it's completely understandable, and it's human nature that you'll hear about a concept like this and you kind of put it on the back burner and you say, okay, when I get to a certain point financially, or I find the right opportunity, I'll kind of revisit this idea of using a retirement account to buy a rental property. And so the way that we've tried to think about this to make this as easy of a possibility for clients is, if you open the account and you even just put a little bit of money in there, it could be a few $1,000s just so the account is activated, you're further along down the road. So even if you want to still keep the bulk of your money at a Vanguard or a Fidelity or whatever it may be, you can keep that relationship there, but you've established the account with us. And for your audience, as you know, Chad, what we do is we actually waive the $50 setup fee. So it really actually is a truly free cash account for clients. So there's not any sort of negative financial ramifications for getting the account established and at least partially funded. Because as you know, especially in a really competitive real estate market, you have to be able to act very, very quickly when you do find the opportunity, whether it's on market or off market. And so we want to kind of take as many of the barriers away as we possibly can. And so that's one thing we try to do. So there's no cost. You just let us know that you heard about us through Coach Carson. We waive that $50 setup fee for the retirement account. You move over whatever amount of money you think is appropriate. And so sometimes that's a matter of, maybe you're putting $4,000 or $5,000 so you have $1,000 or $2,000 for your earnest money. You have a little bit of capital reserves. We require at least $750 cash in the account at all times. And so you have a little bit of money to work with so that you can even move forward with making an offer before we've pulled over the bulk of your money, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so we're going back to that original step we talked about, which could take a few weeks. There's some logistics that happen. You at least know you got the account set up. And this is a point that I think you've told me before about it, and I want to reiterate. So if you there's no setup fee, but if you just had $5,000 sitting there in cash for the next 2 years and you're still looking for deals, like, is there a cost ongoing for that as well? I know is there some kind of fee to structure that just sitting there with that cash?
Yeah, good question. So as long as it's just simply sitting there dormant and essentially we're not really having to provide services after we've gotten your account established, then there's not going to be a cost for our IRA product, which is what most of our clients utilize. If you have a solo 401k, we do enact the annual fee at that point because there's a lot of work we have to do on the front end to set those up. But for our IRA clients, there's not going to be any cost until you actually start moving the money, whether it's to a TD Ameritrade for your stocks and your index funds, or you're purchasing a piece of real estate and we're materially involved in assisting you with the investment.
Yeah, that's a really important point because sometimes it takes time for these things to happen, for you to find your property, to find your realtor, but you do want to get that thing set up originally so that it's ready. And the fact that you can sit there in cash for a year or two, worst case, hopefully you'd find a property sooner than that, but you can sit there and not have the fees kind of eat up your cash while it's sitting there. Like that's not normal. Like I've seen other custodians and people who don't do that. So I think that's to me, I think again shows your understanding of the process that your clients are going through. Like y'all are investors too. You understand how this works. And I just think that's a cool feature. All right. So this has been a fun conversation, Sean. Really appreciate it. I guess let's just talk about, for people who are interested in this, I just want to say from my standpoint, like I have a few partners in my Coach Carson world that are third-party custodians that I just really believe in and trust. You and Jim and the whole team at American IRA are people that I trust wholeheartedly and put my money with as well. You can't say that about many people in the world. So I really, for people who are interested in this, just going to give my personal recommendation. You guys do a great work. I work with you behind the scenes. If somebody is interested in setting up an account, like I'm going to have a link to a landing page, I believe, that has, where they can just fill up their information. They put in their name, their phone number, that kind of stuff. And then what happens from there when they're interested in setting up an account, when they've submitted that form?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, that means a lot, the positive feedback, because you're certainly not somebody that just goes off throwing compliments at different vendors or people that you have business relationships with. And so that means a lot that you've had a positive experience and you're willing to share that with your audience. So we do really appreciate that. And so in terms of anyone that's interested in, frankly, just having a conversation, because ultimately we see ourselves as being in the awareness game. We're not pushing you to do business with us, because this only works if you actually use the account to make investments. So there's no point in us trying to quote unquote sell you on something that you may or may not need. And so ultimately, we're just here to be a resource, an educational tool. And so really the best way to find us is if you go through the Coach Carson platform, so coachcarson.com. we do have a link there, and that will take you to a landing page where you can sign up for different information. You can sign up for e-guides, consultations, what have you. So it's kind of the easiest place for your audience to find us.
Awesome. Very good. Well, this has been fun, Sean. Really appreciate your time sharing this. Like, we went into all sorts of detail on the rental, maybe more than what some people thought they were going to get. Like that, I hope so. And if you're willing, we got to do this again in the future. We can go into this because there's all sorts of topics we didn't even touch on, even with this topic, like using LLCs, using, smaller accounts, using combining accounts. So this is a big topic that people, if they like this, this is kind of the version 1.0 of the conversation. There's lots of other details to get into, other types of assets to invest in. So look forward to talking again with you, Sean, in the future.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks so much, Chad. This was fun.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.
If you'd like more details on today's guest or the resources that we discussed, you can find a link to the show notes for today's episode in the podcast description on your podcast player or in the video description on YouTube. And if you're new here, please consider hitting that subscription button on your favorite podcast player or on YouTube so you'll be notified each Monday morning with my newest episode. Everything I've shared with you in this episode has been for general education purposes. I've not considered your specific situation or risk. Before buying your own investments, be sure to consult a financial, real estate, and/or a legal professional. Until next time, I'm Chad Carson. I'm your host for the show, which is all about helping you get out of the financial grind so you can do more of what matters. See you next time.